Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. My guest today is Ayisha Elliott. Ayisha, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hey.
So Ayisha, you are the host of Girl From Eugene, a podcast that I became aware of kind of just scrolling on Facebook. And
Nice.
I started listening to it, and it's really cool. It's definitely different than a lot of the stuff that's being put out locally. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to chat with you and get to know more about how this came to be and kind of the work that you do. So it's great to finally get a chance to meet you. We've kind of talked behind the scenes for about a month and a half about making this happen. So thanks for doing this.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm sorry that my voice sounds like this, but it's been a hell of a month. So this is just what you got. So if you don't understand something, I'm totally fine with repeating it. But yeah.
No, you're great. You're great.
Okay.
So like I said, you host your own podcast, which is really awesome. And we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
25 years of experience creating spaces for individuals who are interested in broadening their understanding of cultures that are underrepresented, while giving talks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and sharing a perspective that is so incredibly important, especially in today's society.
Yes.
So let's just get right into it. At a young age, all the way back to middle school, I watched your interview with Mark Molina, which was great. Shout out to Mark Molina.
Thanks, Mark.
And you were talking about back in middle school, how you just, showed leadership in using your voice. Let's talk about that first.
Oh my God. Okay, so I want to go back to middle school, like what you're saying. It's funny because I need to listen to that interview. Middle school was rough. I mean, I went to middle school in Eugene and in Cottage Grove. So there was a couple different things that happened there. Like I had to kind of fight my way into being understood that I wouldn't be bullied. And then after I actually got my space, then I could create more space, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it was like I said, living here and living in the household that I lived in, but living in Cottage Grove, and like I said, the household that I lived in, there was always this first space of like, I will make my space. And then once I made my space, then I could do what I do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I can only imagine, obviously Eugene is a very white dominated community. It goes without saying. Yeah. So I can only imagine middle school is a time where people will find anything about each individual and they'll just be like, oh, you're different or you're weird or you're odd, and so I can't even imagine what that would have been like. Because I know for me in middle,
I think I fought sixth grade when I moved to Cottage Grove. We were supposed to go into seventh grade or something like that, fifth grade to sixth grade, and we were supposed to go into middle school. But then I went to Cottage Grove and they still had it in elementary school. I was pissed. And so when I remember, like literally, I was the only Black girl like in the city besides my sister. There was another mixed race girl who came later, but I fought almost every day. And the people that I fought with were mostly boys. Wow. And we like physically fight until they started realizing that I will not fight. And then finally they left me alone. Like it was a while, but I mean like almost every day for the first, I'd say, I don't even know, months and months that I was there for school. Wow. It was a regular thing for sure.
So now dealing with all of that, where did the confidence come from to start kind of using your voice? And then who were some of your earliest role models?
But my confidence came from home. I mean, that's what I was saying. Like, it's so funny because, I have my own children now and everyone who meets my children will say, your children are so well-mannered and they're so confident and well-assured because our household is our identity and the love in our household was so strong that even the outside influence, I always knew that I was more than what people were saying that I was, if that made sense.
Yeah.
So if I went to society and they would say, oh, Black girl, you sit in the back. Oh, Black girl, you get smaller. Oh, Black girl, you stop talking so loud. I always knew I had, more than they would allow me to show. So there was always an awareness that I was kind of being quieted, and so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question. That's where I got it from. I got it from the reassurance of my home and the community that my parents and my siblings made for all of us, for each other inside the household. So it was very, very, very strong about who we were and what our purpose was in this world, period. And our purpose at that point as a child was to be kind, loving, and, and open. So that's what we were. But when it comes to who I was, my identity, not a question in terms of strength and groundedness. My parents did a great job of that. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, it was never like, I don't know if I should. I was like, I will fight you. Like, I will fight you over this. I know I don't belong. So it was like that. So my role models growing up, I mean, I would have to say, like, even in my family, I'm one of the people who like kind of do things differently. Like, I'm one of the people like, oh, I don't know if we can. I'm going, I think we could. And I just kind of go. So I've always been that way. But I think the combination of my dad's, just like, he wasn't really a fluffy person, you know what I mean? And he's a philosopher and an Egyptologist and he just always was putting common sense to higher thought process. And so with him and my mother's like fathomable kindness, patience, and wisdom, mixing those two together, they were a role model for me. And I can't think of like who I thought of outside the household, although I was always like super into pop culture and stuff like that. But when it comes to like really how I mitigated through my life, it's a combination of both my mom and my dad.
What was the response from the school when you were getting in fights? I mean, was it at school or was it off school grounds?
Oh, Patty, I don't get caught.
Well,
no.
That's good.
I mean, yeah, honestly, like I don't get caught. But
Sure.
I remember I never got caught, to be honest. They would be fighting with me and I would be beating them up, right? We would be fighting. And these are boys. So they just got beat up by the one black girl. Do you think they're telling anybody?
Sure.
They're not telling anybody.
Yeah.
And they were trying to like get me like behind the gym or like, so there's nobody around.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's where they would try to like jump me or they'd try to like pick on me. And they'd get their butt kicked and they're not going to tell anyone about that. So we never got like actually adult intervention was never a thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just curious because Cottage Grove has a reputation on how they handle stuff, even to this day, and so.
The adults were never involved. They like literally never knew. I'm trying to think. The one time I did get in trouble, I was threatened with, but I think we were threatened with like, not being able to go to the camp that we were all supposed to be going, like outdoor school or something like that. So we were threatened, like we would not be able to attend certain things. But like I'm saying, I don't even remember my parents ever being called to the school.
Yeah.
So it was like that. Like the kids were like I think the adults may have even known and was like just letting it happen. I don't really know, but like. That's
kind of what I was getting at, because with Cottage Grove, I don't want to throw them under the bus too much. I do, but I'm not going to. But Cottage Grove, it's probably a better thing that the parents didn't get involved, because kids are kids. Kids are going to be assholes, and I'm not defending those kids. Those kids are horrible for wanting to fight you, But at the same time, the parents, it gets even worse.
I mean, it's probably best because they definitely did not want to go toe to toe with my parents.
Right.
Now, it's probably best we just left it to what we were doing. And to this day, I don't know. I just think of it as it like built my character. Like I don't even think of it. It's weird. I think of like, it's almost unfortunate that people of color, like the kids, when they grew up here with my kids, they had other kids that were of color. Even if it was just 2 or 3, there was a crew. I didn't have a crew, right? And you need a crew. And so you need a community. And I didn't have one. And so for me, it really built that kind of not just the fighting, but just the knowing and dealing with the adults and dealing with the kids and knowing that I was up against a wall. Like, instead of being defeated by it, it was really about me being just like super hard-headed. Like, I was just like, you're not going to put me somewhere. And so for me, it kind of built that layer of, I don't know, just of that, like, there's not so much that they will be able to do because you've done everything. Like, that's kind of how it felt until I got older. And then I was like, oh no, this is everything. And now I'm done. But then it was like, I was building this way of like dealing with it. And if it meant I had to fight for my space, I would. But after that, like, no one messed with me anymore. Like, it was like, okay, she's just like not going to let us bully her around. And then it was cool. And then I had friends. It was weird.
Right. And that's how it works unfortunately with fighting, usually with boys, but so, the reason I wanted to ask about that is fast forward, 25 years. And if you could look back and you had someone like yourself and you were that middle school kid and you had someone like yourself that was strong and confident, I guess you would have done it regardless because of that hard-headedness. Yeah. But it probably would have meant a lot, So Now, what does it mean today to be a role model and recognizable leader in our community?
Oh, I mean, why I chose middle school kids for my Kids for the Culture very intendedly. Like everything I've done is extremely focused, right? Like Black Girl from Eugene is extremely focused. Kids for the Culture is extremely focused. Nurturing Black is extremely focused, and it's all based on first very first thing, my lived experience, and the second thing is research. And so all of those things are really not something I'm just pulling out of the air. And so when it comes to like me being a role model for middle school kids, I just attract middle school kids and high schoolers because the level of energy and truth that I bring to everything I do. Those kids are looking for truth, right? They're not looking for the roundabout. And so I give them the reason and the why, and then I give them the empowerment to show up the way they show up, right? I mean, the one thing that I had always done in my life when I was young was just really understand that I was empowered to feel like I could. Like I was always a very optimistic person, and I still am. There was very few things that I'd be like, I don't know that I can do that. I'm just like, okay, let's see how much we can do, all like that. And so I can translate that into lots of different middle school, high school languages. And so for me to be a leader, my skill set is that I'm an intuitive communicator, which means I, in the very moment, can understand what's needed and get there in terms of the basic subject that we're talking about. So if we're talking about being Black, if we're talking about race equity, we're talking about empowerment, we're talking about, I don't know, adolescence, I can mix it all together in a real quick way. I can take it from a high level of education and bring it to a street level of understanding really quickly. And so kids do that too. Middle schoolers do that too. We talk down as if they don't understand it, but they can take what we're trying to say and simplify it to make it work for them. They may not have the vocabulary, they may not have the life experience, but they've got the gist of what needs to happen. So when you give them information, it only takes energy and encouragement for them to blow it all the way up. Most people are worried about their emotions, and they're moody, and they're like hard to get with. But honestly, it just is how you communicate, and I'm good at it. So that's literally the leadership that I'm with is like, let me talk to you. And then you go do whatever that means to you. Go do what you think it means and blow it up. And generally, that's how I feed the people that I work with and people I work for, is like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how it works for you. I'm going to encourage you and I'm going to empower you with what I feel that I see in you and the information that we have together. And then you are going to go and you're going to take it and you're going to go and do whatever you want with it. And it's going to be beautiful. It works out very, very well.
Yeah, I think it's so important that everyone, not just young adults, but everyone is told that they're special. Everyone's told that they're awesome, that they have something in them, that they have drive, passion, all that. It goes a long way, especially, everybody.
And to be like big, it's like, you came here, you've got vision. You don't even have to have the idea. Like you've got an idea. It's different than this. That is enough to change so much. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just understanding that it's different than what it is right now, that it can be better, that is enough. We can spark that. You can blow that up. So, just having those little words. And that's, like you said, for adults too. It's like, even my consultations, like when I'm working with businesses and I'm doing consultations, it's like I'm saying these things to the directors. I'm saying these things to the CEOs who are worried and scared about what it means to change their businesses or change their nonprofits to becoming, inclusive. It's a long and hard deconstruction process, and they need to be encouraged too. So it works really well with everything that I do, just to know that it is a process for all of us, no matter what stage you're at, and you need to be gassed up so that you can do it. It's a long road. It's a marathon.
For sure.
Like you got to know you can make it to the end.
So the big thing I wanted to talk about today is your website and your podcast. That, like you had talked about before, it's kind of, the whole thing is really streamlined. The website is phenomenal. I mean, there's so much depth to it. It's blackgirlfromeugene.org, and the podcast is called Black Girl from Eugene. I'm going to go over kind of the three major sections that I drew from the website, and we'll talk about each one. Let's start with race equity talks. These are conversations designed to break down white supremacy. What do these conversations look like, and who would be the ideal participants?
So this is funny because my website totally needs to be updated.
Sure. And that's always the case.
Right? It needs to be. I was like, oh wait, I gotta keep working at it. Dang, like I did it. It's good. Like, no, you gotta keep doing it. So anyway, it does need to be updated. That the talks is one aspect that I do. So conversations about race. It's a series now. Like I said, it needs to be updated. And I talk to everyone. Literally I did yoga groups, soccer moms, like I do those, I do community groups, book clubs, and then I go all the way up to nonprofits, small ones, large ones. I've worked with, I've worked with people, nonprofits that are perinatal based and prenatal based, and then I've worked with nonprofits that are so big that they have branches in California and Washington, right? I've worked in higher education. I've worked with businesses. So I've worked with the U of O, U of H, Oberlin in Ohio. I'm working, colleges in California. So and then, like I said, also businesses. I've worked with straight up small size to mid-sized businesses. And so what it looks like is several different things. I offer lectures. I've worked with the state of Oregon. So I work in government section. I work with the county and the state and the city. So I've worked with all of these folks. And in different capacities. I can do advisement, and which is I'm doing consultations. I'm looking at hiring practices. I'm looking at, policy. I'm looking at the culture of your business. There's that. And then it goes down to just having conversations when we have a series of 2 hours, 6 hours, but they're 2 hours each. And we sit down and we go one-to-one with intimate conversations about race and how it shows up in your life. Everything I do, whether it's for businesses or small practices, or if it's for communities, it's all about aligning intention to impact. My whole work is intention, what your intention is, and aligning it to your impact. And so obviously I work with a lot of white businesses. I work with a lot of white owned businesses, but I also work with groups of BIPOC people as well, because we're deconstructing white supremacy. So, and we're trying to show up authentically, and being able to deconstruct white supremacy means we got to talk about white supremacy. And it's really white supremacy culture, which really doesn't actually have a race attached to it, but it actually is absolutely benefiting white and privileged people. So we really it's a very nuanced conversation. A lot of the conversations I have are basing your experience with race and your experience of how you actually personally process it. So if we can first think about that, and then we go into the other constructs of how race shows up, we can actually, it's actually change and move things around. It's kind of like when you go and you just learn the definitions, you learn the toolbox. I'm teaching you how to, you get a toolbox. I'm actually teaching you how to use the tools, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. So I want to talk about this. Okay, so now hear me out. This is painful, but diversity training, right? Now it's garbage, right? Like in this terminology, I'll get to my point. But remember Eugene was on Fox News. Anytime Eugene, Oregon's spotlighted on Fox News, it's trouble, because they're like, look at these liberals, But they were doing a thing about diversity training at the Olympic trials, like the first ones way back in the day. And I mean, I've had to process and learn that, like you were talking about this breakdown of white supremacy. I have had to evolve as a human being, just like everyone, And at the time, I didn't understand. I'm like, what is this? Why are people freaking out? Now I would look at it more like, when you talk about conversations of race, that is a very different thing than diversity training, because diversity training is how do we have these conversations while maintaining the structure of white supremacy? Is that a correct assessment?
I mean, yes, absolutely. That's a great assessment. Yeah. And the problem with it is that, that's an excellent assessment. And the problem with it is that people don't even understand what diversity really means. Because, you can say diversity, and what? You're talking about cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, language diversity. What are you talking about? Gender diversity? What are you talking about? Right? And so people say diversity, and they just immediately go black, white, and brown.
Right.
That means you lack a depth of understanding what diversity even is. So just even in the constructs of white supremacy, narrowing these definitions to quickly assess a situation is exactly. Actually right. A product of white supremacist culture. You know what I'm saying? The urgency and the need to simplify is a part of white supremacist culture practices, and we just kind of go along with it. So, like for instance, I'm actually an advisor for a nonprofit group that I was speaking about. I'm an advisor to two. And one of them, we're doing culturally matched care. And they're like, well, what is culture? Well, immediately someone says culture is like, they start to describe ethnicity,
Sure.
right? And well, that's not culture. So if you're going to do culturally matched care, you can literally be culturally matched with people who live rurally. And that's a culture in itself. And so if you live rurally and understand what it means to live off the grid, then you can culturally match to that lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's the thing. People don't really take the time to know what the definitions and the breadth of those definitions actually mean.
Right.
So diversity, and you're talking about, I mean, your definition of what you said that to
diversity training. Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. Because if we're trying to surmise it and just go white supremacy, the fact that we don't even indicate which diversity we're talking about is absolutely right there, is immediately a red flag of, oh, this is assimilation training.
Yeah.
This is assimilation training. And we're all going to learn how we can all act like them. You know what I mean?
And you wrote about that. Now that you mentioned the assimilation aspect, you wrote about that in the Eugene Weekly in one of your columns about how you're not going to assimilate. I'm going to be me, and I think that's really, really good. And I think it's important for people that are not Black to think like that too. It's like, I'm going to be me in every aspect of life. Do you know what I mean? Like it may not be accepted by others, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to be me because that's what's true to me, Now, as far as the, one thing that I realized as far as diversity and ethnicity and all this stuff, this is such a stupid light bulb moment for me, but it's not. I mean, it's one of those things. I think it's so important for people to be able to know the difference between ethnicity and, first of all, nationality. Because when you talk about nationality, that doesn't define anyone other than what country you live in. That's it. So it's like when someone's like, what is an American?
Our nationality is North American.
Right. And so it's like, what nationality are you? I mean, I have a coworker that she said, it turns out I did a 23andMe. Turns out I'm not Mexican. I'm like, that's because that's a country. And she's like French and Aztec and Spanish. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's anthropology. Good job. That's your first grade is an A, and because I had a guy that I was cutting his hair for a long time and he was a redheaded white, pale complected like me. And I'm like, where are you from? He's like, well, I'm Cuban. And I instantly was like, what? And he's like, yeah, dude, Irish people move everywhere. And it just kind of was a light bulb moment where I was like, wow, if I can start to think about this in a way that, now, when you say where you're from, you're talking about like, where did you grow up? Like you say, Black girl from Eugene, not in Eugene.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I did that on purpose. A lot of people were like in Eugene, and it makes sense because like that would be a good, like, I'm a Black girl in Eugene, like WTF, like what the hell am I doing here? Like that makes sense to say Black girl in Eugene. But I wanted I wanted to indicate that I'm actually from Eugene, and that twisted a little bit.
Yeah, because it's your home.
Twisted a little bit. Yeah, and so you'll have to learn more about why it twisted. But I did that absolutely on purpose.
Let's talk about Kids for Culture. Kids for Culture is a place for young people to better access the tools to become future leaders who center around Black wellness and perspective. Talk about that a little bit. And then is your website the best place for people to kind of reach out and find more about this?
Yes, it is the best place. And it's kids for the culture. And so the whole thing for the culture is like an urban thing of, being like, you like, it's like, I'm not trying to like think of a white way of saying like, like you only live once. And it's kind of like, and that for me, that's like for you, like do it like for you. And so for the culture is like, show up for the culture, like, be Black excellence, like for the culture. So it's like kids for the culture, right?
I got it.
And that's where the leadership comes in. But what's really funny about it being Black centered and Black focused is that it's not only for Black kids, but the thing is, or BIPOC kids, white kids are welcome. And that was we have a committee of children who are BIPOC, and they asked that we bring in white kids to be taught by Black people about Black stuff. Because and this is a quote from one of the girls. She was like, "We are tired of defending ourselves. Like they need to know what we know." And we were like, "That is so right." So the thing about our nonprofit is that it's not necessarily, we won't have, it's primarily BIPOC children. So we won't have like a room of 10 kids and there's a bunch of white kids that want to get in. And there's like, you know, four BIPOC kids who come in late. BIPOC kids get priority, obviously. And then we fill the rest up with all the white children. But we want white kids to come. The problem is when we say Black centered and Black focused, white people immediately go, oh, that's for someone else. That's not for us, right? But the truth of it is, the leadership part of this and having it being Black centered is that the very center of North American culture is based in Black history, right? It's based in the ability and capability of the Black community. So it's really important that we teach what we need to know about Black history and Black modern accomplishment from a Black perspective. Everyone can learn that.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? And everyone needs to hear it. So that's what we do. And so all the things that we teach will be taught by someone of color. It will be coming from a perspective centered from that lived experience and from that research. And it will be coming from a perspective that uplifts that narrative. And so that's really the centerpiece of it, that you will not get a white teacher teaching you about Black life, right, or Black history or Black wellness. It will be someone Black, brown, who will be teaching that. And that's like the center of it. And we're coming from all of our lived experience and we're teaching history, tying our historic accomplishments to our modern day movements. And so and then we tie it to activities. It's amazing.
So now if people are interested, parents or kids, they can go, or, you know, young adults, whatnot, they can go to the website, and the link's going to be in the show notes anywhere you're watching or listening to this.
And we have a Facebook page and a LinkedIn. It's Kids for the Culture, either way.
And I want to ask about this, but I want to make sure that I don't link these two things about critical race theory. You know, because I know that it's become just a buzzword again about critical race theory, but you had talked about it. Well, I mean, it's for the people that are unwilling to actually learn about what they're talking about, you know? And so I think what you're talking about, from my understanding, and I have a very base level understanding of it, I'll be the first to admit, but it sounds, there's similarities in a way that and maybe you'll be able to define this better than I could, but critical race theory is designed to teach about history, where stuff that's been omitted also, and then also from different perspectives. Is that correct?
No.
So yeah, I mean, I know nothing. So, I mean, tell me about what is your take on critical race theory, and what do you think it is?
Critical race theory is the law that was made, it's learning about law. It's learning about laws that basically systemically excluded Black people from the access and resource of the United States.
And it's primarily taught in law school. You know, that's right.
Yeah. So the thing is that the interesting part about critical race theory and how you can broaden it is like, that's what I think people are doing, and it's, you can't put that in the wrong hands, right? So the thing about critical race theory, it is the basis of systemic racism. It's the laws that created the systems that still to this day exclude Black people from access and resource, right? From what the United States is built on. Yet it's built on the backs of Black, we know all this, right? Built on the backs of Black and brown people. Yet it is designed to exclude us from the privilege and benefits of the system in which we built. So there's that. Learning how that happened is what the original critical race theories is about, right? What that meant to do and what that does. That's what critical race theories is really about. But when it comes down, if you're gonna broaden it, it goes down into the facts that we're not taught that was by design. We're not taught that was absolutely on purpose. And like I said, it wasn't like, oh, well, then how did the Blacks get excluded? It was like, no, we are excluding Black people, and this is how we're going to do it. So,
and it's
so when you take it out and you broaden it to bring it down up levels of academia, and you want to bring it down, it is those other things, right? Technically, it does equate to all of the like I said, barriers to accessing resource. It is those things. So it just kind of like, well, then how does that show up? How does it show up in in real estate? How does it show up in housing? How does it show up in education? How does it show up in health disparities? How does it show up in, so then we can like start to like balloon out critical race theory to like, this is how it shows up. This is the design of these things. And this is why Black folks explicitly anti-Blackness is written into the word. So teaching that and saying that it's actually it's not by accident, and this is how it's excluded from the history books, excluded from the education system. This is how we designed it and decided to do it this way.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to talk about how that's going to be taught in middle school, when the truth of it is when you water it down, it's basically what people are saying. You're going to teach the Black and brown side of the story, but that's not what critical race theory is. That's allowing Black and brown stories to be heard. If we were to undo and actually get into critical race theories, you will know that there is a story that does not add up to why there's a lack of access and resource in 2021. So when we start to do that, you'll go, well, oh, there is a different story. It starts to unfold. So all of this unfolding comes back to how middle schoolers are going, how parents are going, we don't want our middle schoolers learning about, the slaves, the slaves that Thomas Jefferson owned and fathered, And so it's like, we don't want to know that part. Well, if we're going to break down race in America, and we're actually going to break down how we came to this piece, there's a whole nother side to that story, and we're not telling it.
Well, there's a lot of issues with teaching history, and I don't want to be. I mean, there's a debate on if critical race theory is just teaching history. I mean, I actually think it is. Because like you just said, it's actually law that was written. It's not debatable. It exists. But then there's issues with teaching history wrong. Like Christopher Columbus. I mean, it's bullshit. But then the Italian Americans have their experience and their story, and they're like, "What? You're taking away our dude?" You know what I'm saying? And so these things, they're not. I mean, I'm just saying it's true. Like these people,
it's all a lie,
right?
I mean, I cannot imagine what group of dudes that were like, created. I mean, the way that colonialism worked was so damn brilliant. Like it's like to mind wash the entire globe is in such a way is like phenomenal in like the most evil way. You know what I'm saying? It's like a mad genius. Like it's insane. So anyway, all I'm saying is like to be able to wash across and for all of us to be fooled in such a way talks to the psyche of human beings more than anything else. But for me, and so I, in all of my work, I have a very, very spiritual base in all the work I do. And like my degrees are in cognitive neuroscience. It's in human behavior. So that's when I look at all my race theory and all of the way that I talk to people and communicate what I believe to be true is based in behavior. And so when you can get to why someone does something, it just clicks. But that's the same way white supremacy worked. You see what I'm saying? Right. To be able to believe that you are just innately better and therefore deserve more, And so when it comes to Italians and it comes to this, you got to go back to, I mean, Christopher Columbus was before white was white, but you got to remember that Christopher Columbus wasn't Italian when I learned about him.
Right.
He was a white dude.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
I'm just saying when it's misled, when people are misled, then there's these historical figures that are celebrated that it's like, but that's not the truth. Like that's not the full story.
But how did Christopher Columbus stop being Italian?
Right.
When did he stop? When did he start being white for everybody?
Right.
Most people don't think about Christopher Columbus as Italian.
Well, what about you?
Unless you really know about your history and you're learning about. But Christopher Columbus, when I was in 5th grade, was a white dude.
Yeah, I started reading a book called How the Irish Became White. It's pretty troublesome, but it's interesting.
Well, I mean, look at how white folks became white. I took a whole course in it. It's a whole damn course on how white folks became white because they weren't white before. They were Polish. They were Irish. The percentage of Irish I have in my bloodstream, I'm like damn near 50%. Now I'm not, neither of my parents are 50% Irish.
Sure.
But I have such a high
much,
percentage of Irish all the way through my ancestry that it's like, I'm like, where is the white dude at? Like, where is he at? And the thing is that once you're black, right? Once you're black, you're black. There's no Irish
Right.
anymore. There's no
Yeah.
Italian anymore. But if you can identify as white and drop the Italian and gain resources and financial back, that's how white became white. I mean, like I said, there's a whole course. You can take a year's worth of study on how white folks became white. But it just like critical race theory, it's about money.
Yeah.
It's always about resource.
I think it's
You know
really
what I mean?
important for everyone, but for white people to know more than just I'm American.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it's really an equalizer when you talk about, because I've said this before on the podcast, and it may come it is what it is. This is something I'm working on. So I'm workshopping it, so it's not great. But you've got a lot of different stories in America. You've got the immigrant experience that's a couple generations, or even just the individual themselves that immigrated here. And then you have natives, and then you have blacks. You have the slaves. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. You know what I'm saying? So it's pretty harsh when for some people it's too uncomfortable to have these conversations. But the thing is that we just need to acknowledge it so that we can start to learn like our place in society. Or I don't know. I mean,
well, I think the first thing we have to do is remove the borders. And I don't mean the border of Canada or the border of Mexico. I mean the borders, period. Because when people say natives, right? We don't even know. You wouldn't even recognize a true native to North America if they walked up on you. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah.
And that's the truth. I mean, the fact that Mexico, like, we can't borderline Mexico. Mexico went into Texas, into Oklahoma, you see what I'm saying? And so
because people migrate, period. You know, so
they're indigenous people versus the Northwest indigenous people. It's like, we don't even know. We got to take the borders off and go, what the hell happened? Right. So, I mean, it's just, it goes way far back. We have so much deconstruction that has to happen for everyone to be able to see each other. And truth, it's not even about to see each other. It's like for you to show up.
Yeah.
So for you to show up as Irish,
this is
right.
Totally.
For me to show up as whatever mix I am, you know what I mean? Like, for me to show up, that's what we really got.
And it's tough because, for me, I have a ton of pride in my roots and my heritage and stuff about being Irish, so so it's tough to have these conversations because our identities are so defined by that, so I'm going to Ireland in September, actually. But
hey, I'm trying to go to Ireland. I'm trying to see if I recognize anybody. I'm like, hey, what's going on? No, I'm just kidding.
No.
But no.
I think it's really cool. This is why your podcast is so great. It's because this is the kind of stuff that you'll discuss, and it's really, really thought provoking, and it's cool. We gotta move on because we got a lot of stuff. This is, I think, really cool. All this stuff is cool. I don't want to make it. This is a big one. They're all big. But Nurturing Black, this is a group mentorship program for white parents raising Black and biracial babies.
Yep.
And, these are my words, but this is a lot more than hair tutorials. What are some of the biggest challenges facing white parents and then Black children with white parents?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, it's huge. That's a huge thing. The parents, the biggest challenges is that they don't have the same lived experience, and they want to love and protect their child, and they do it the way they know how, which is culturally based. It doesn't protect them. That doesn't protect their children, and it actually harms their kids later on. Right? That is something that they're like viscerally aware of, especially, and this is a lot of people say, especially after George Floyd. For them, that was a wake up call, right? But so they really are having a hard time. Like, I know that my child will have a lived experience that I don't understand, for one. 2, I can't protect them from. 3, I know how bad and evil it is. And 4, how early am I supposed to be like putting the fear into them about like, and it's like, there's a perspective for white folks and Black folks. The way that your child has to move through the world is going to be different than the way they move through the world. That's what we talk about quite a bit. And we talk about how they can ally with their child and how they can empower their child instead of feeding their child with the fear that they feel. White people lead with fear quite a bit. Black people do not. It's literally we're on a different rhythm for how we walk through the world. And so teaching white parents how to see a different side of existing when there is fear is really hard to do. And that's a lot of the work that I do. I mean, not just that, but that is it. So that's really one of the first things for parents. For the kids, generally the children that I work with are very young. Some of these parents are working with me and the babies aren't even born yet. They're like, I want to get this right from day one. Children identify differences, as early as 6 months. Like, they're identifying differences. So you got to be able to like have conversations. You got to be comfortable with race. You got to be comfortable with how you feel about Black people, right? And so that's what's different, in that generally when I'm working with mixed race people, the research that I've done and the lived experience I have is with adults who are harmed and who have identity crisis that they are working through, that were put onto them by their parents unknowingly. And so a lot of times these people the folks are like, hey, my parents have no idea what they actually did. And I have to undo it as an adult. And it hurts because I feel like I'm not Black enough to be Black. And I feel like I'm not white enough to be white. And I feel like, and there's all of these the way that they move through the world that is something that wasn't given to them as a empowerment tool or as something that they could utilize as an adult. It was more used as a weapon, and it was used as something to be fearful of and to be careful about. And having to see yourself like that and trying to grow through the world and be excellent is difficult to do. It happens all the time, but I've never met any adult Black and white biracial person that I've worked with that didn't have that exercise to do, right? Some of them never get over it, and some of them are like, yeah, this was what happened in my life, and I have learned that this is what this was, and they are completely whole and feel like non-harmed, and they understand what their parents tried to do. But it was like, I had to do this work on my own later. Then my family just doesn't get it, or that's just who they are.
Going all the way back to the first thing we were talking about, middle school. Some people like being on an island. Some people like being different and sticking out, being unique. Do you know? And some people want to be in the corner, hidden and not seen as much.
Yeah.
And I would imagine for biracial people, that's kind of there's a lot of, it's difficult because of the fact that you're like, where do I fit in? And for some people, it's going to be like, I don't need to fit in. I want to be me, and
absolutely.
that's what I'm going to celebrate,
No, absolutely. I mean, just how people, it says a lot how people identify themselves. So people will be like, I'm mixed race. Okay. You can identify those folks as in one of those categories that you just said, like, okay. And then you've got someone who will say, I'm Black with white parents. Okay, I know where they're coming from. I have someone who says I'm biracial, Black and white. Okay, they're coming from a different place. Okay, then someone's like, oh, well, I'm, what's another one I've heard where people refer to themselves as a derogatory statement. I'm an Oreo. Okay, I see something else coming from that, right? So there's ways that the way that people as adults, these are adults that I'm talking to, what that we're talking about when they're identifying themselves. Children don't do that, right? The world identifies them, and then the adult identifies themselves later. So anyway, basically, like, when I'm talking to adults, how they decide to identify their biracial existence says a lot about how far they have, how much and the way that they have processed how they show up in the world. And it's absolutely their own to do. Right. I'm just here picking it up.
Right. Well,
I'm picking it up.
Like the Oreo comment.
I'm not telling anybody how to be.
No.
I'm talking to their parents about, like, don't lead with fear. Let me tell you how this works out. Like, let them show you the narrative, and then learn how to follow your child. Learn how to recognize when you and your family are walking into a den of lions. Like, understand racism. Decenter yourself. All of these exercises that I do with them is something that comes along with nurturing Black.
Well, that's a very difficult thing, though, from a parent's perspective, where you're like, so if I'm getting this right, you're like, don't lead with. maybe I'm understanding this wrong, so you'll be able to fill me in. But like, if it's like, okay, for example, if you have if you're a white parent and you have a Black kid and you're like preparing them, they're going out without you, maybe at 10, 12, 13 years old, whatever. and you have to give them the conversation about like, well, if you're pulled over, like make sure that you show your hands and all the shit that you have to do if you're black that you don't necessarily have to do if you're white.
Right.
I mean, and I think sometimes this gets convoluted because everyone is afraid of police, period. Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like everyone feels shitty in that situation. But I had a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girlfriend, and I'll tell you right now, she's like, "Fuck you" to the cops, and she had no problem with it, and she didn't get her ass beat. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I couldn't believe it. I thought she should, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but this is the thing. It's not about like. It's one thing about leading with your life with fear, and it's another like leading your life with awareness. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so Black folks, we know that we can walk into the store with our hoodie on.
And it's naive to me to think that it's 13 because that happens at like 4. So, where you realize
that happens at like 4. So what you're trying to do, just like you try to tell a kid not to, you don't want to stand on the back of a chair. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to do these things, right? So you're leading with fear. Why would you not want to stand on the back of a chair? Lead with some awareness. So there's a different way of doing this that works where there's a world outside of who that child is, that they are not the problem. That is what, and the thing is that where parents don't actually see what we're saying and doing when we lead with fear, when they are looking like what you are actually saying everyone is scared of, right? So you got to switch that narrative. It's not that, it's like they are not the problem. The problem is outside of them, right? And that they have to be aware of what they are navigating through. It's not that they have to be anything different than who they are. They're navigating through something that isn't quite developed. It's not 100%. Well, yeah. It can't see their beauty or efficacy. But if the parents are teaching from the viewpoint of how to get through this maze in a way that the maze wins, that's not empowering your child.
Yeah. I've seen some pretty incredible grandmas. I've seen some pretty incredible, white grandmas with black grandkids. I've seen some real mama bear shit. Yeah. I give, when I talk to these parents, I give them all the love because what they're trying now, whether or not they went into it completely ignorantly, because some of them do. That's life itself. Yeah.
The courage it takes to say, I have a child I love with all my heart, and I don't know how to protect them. Please help me. That's a massive step into vulnerability. And I celebrate that. Like, I applaud that. I'm like, that to me is bigger than what you think you can't do. Right? So that's, first off, I don't have anything negative to say about white parents that are raising black kids and who are showing up to tell me, please help me with this, because I know that I am not enough. Right. And at the same time, I don't tell them about their kid. I tell them, well, if you're going to be their parents, you're going to need to be enough. So this is not about them. This is about you and how you feel about black people and how you feel about the black community, because how you feel about it will seep into your child, just like if they were white. How you feel about being white goes right into your kid. How you feel about black people goes right into your kid.
Well, I think
if they're black, how you feel about black people reflects onto how they see themselves in you. You gotta be pro-black.
I mean, I think if you were working with parents of transgender kids, you're right, where the parent is like, what do I do when society doesn't accept my kid? You're like, well, have you accepted them? you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the first step. Like, have you accepted it? I mean, that's
it. That's huge. So. But that, you got to understand, that's a hard lesson.
Yeah.
Hard lesson. Because you're like, well, you're my kid. I love you. Right? I love you.
Sure.
Oh, but I'm a whole piece of a community. Right? Like, I'm a whole part of a whole community. And so, and the way that they talk about trans, they talk about trans community and trans existence bleeds out whether or not they're pro anything. And so, yeah, you can love your trans child, sure. But you can smell the fact that anybody else does not work for you, right? You can see it. And that is the issue. And that harms the child.
Right.
So you gotta be, if you have a black child or a biracial child, you gotta be pro-black. Now understanding pro-black is something. This is how deep racism goes. Talking to a white person about being pro-black, they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, no one said you do. Please do not cornrow your hair. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying you have to change being white in order to be pro-black. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm pro LGBTQ. I'm not queer. I don't have to be queer to be pro LGBTQ. What it means is that I am championing their right to be here in the way that they feel that they should be here. I will champion that. I will move aside so that they can have space because I'm pro LGBTQ, period. White people can be pro-black. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's hard because racism is that deep for white people to believe that it's appropriate to be pro-black when you're white.
I think young people, like I'm talking high school and under right now, I think that it's so different. The way that, they understand it. They're just like, no, this person, what defines somebody doesn't make them any less or more of anything. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, there. it's better. I mean, we've made tremendous progress. I do want to talk about that and then we're going to get out of here. Progress in the community, and what are some areas that progress has been made on issues of race? And what are some areas that we've gone backwards?
Progress has been made. The fact that white people are talking about it in a way that they've never talked about it before. White supremacy is becoming a household conversation, right? That's progress. Understanding white supremacy differently than just the KKK and understanding that it can be, understood as like a grocery store can be a white supremacist space because it is indicative of white supremacist culture. White people are starting to understand that. Huge. That is different, right? So yeah, that's the progress.
I think for me, from my perspective, one thing that from a white person's perspective, one thing that I've seen that's really been cool is that people of color, in my opinion, have been more willing to allow people to say cringy shit, like to say stuff that they've learned. Like in my experience, I'm 39, so I've seen some real changes in the way that racist is talked about, by white people and black people and brown people and whatever else. But I mean, there's so much of a learning curve about culture when it's so different, you know what I mean? And there's all these structures, but that's one thing, like you talk about that, it's like these conversations are being had by white people. I think that's a whole societal thing where people are like, all right, let them just limp through this or, just figure it out on the go.
I mean, yeah, having critical race theory be a topic that I can say CRT and people know what I'm saying, that's huge. That's progress. It doesn't matter if they understand what the hell it means. The fact that they know that those three things go together, it's just like, okay, we can work with, we got similar vocabulary even. Yay, we're getting there. I mean, these are small steps. These are very small steps, but this is indicative of how far we had to go.
What about backwards? How were the areas that we've gone backwards?
It's the clutching pearls are just getting tighter and tighter and tighter. How when people are holding on to it, they're starting to like foam at the mouth, right? It's like it's not when people are scared, and so the backwards part is that fear is for those people is eliminating choice, it's eliminating wisdom. You know what I'm saying? It's eliminating process, and so that's where we're going backwards. Is that the fear has gone up so much, all the propaganda around. The blacks are taking over, right? Like all that part, like it has caused such a high level of fear for people who really don't understand and who are really ignorant. And I mean ignorant meaning like not informed.
Yeah.
That fear has caused such a backlash. It's painful. It's painful in processing even themselves. And that part, I think, is becoming more and more evident. And meaning that like they are showing themselves and being like, we're proud to be stuck in this place. And this is where we belong. And if you're not here, and it's always been there, but now it's out in it's violent, in violent in an out way. I mean, does that make sense? Like,
well, people with equity,
tell you it's been violent ever since. But to be violent in the grocery store and no one knows what to do and the cop is not coming, that is backwards. We're going backwards that way.
With equity, people look at equity like it's pie. Like it's like I think they have to give a slice of their equity for someone else to have equity. That's just not how it works. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so that's a big one. I wanted to talk about one last thing. Reflections on the past Juneteenth celebration. This last year, Juneteenth, the celebration was huge in Eugene. And I know you spoke at it. I didn't. I caught like the very tail end. But I want to hear what you have to say about that experience that day and that celebration and what it meant to you.
It was really fun. I was really, really excited that it's getting so big. And because I'm one of the original, like I'm one of the people who celebrated it, here in Eugene 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It's funny to see people think it's the first one or the original one. That's funny. But I really love that the people who are bringing it together are able to have a like-minded goal and accomplish something so joyous for everyone to come. And the fact that there were so many Black-owned businesses. I mean, we took up the whole section. I mean, it was like this. It was just huge. Like there was several. I mean, how many? Like 30, 40? I mean, it was so many. And they were inundated with business. They were busy. Everyone was exhausted. Kids were playing with each other that they don't know. Kids are playing in the grass, showing like a level of like feeling a sense of community that I had not felt in Eugene in a really long time, And so I'm really, really happy that sense of community is just starting to spark. And in a place like Juneteenth, we were able to come together in a like-minded Black joy essence and have white folks, brown folks, everyone be there and celebrate together and have it so safe and loving and fun. It was so much fun. Like the music was good. The entertainment was good. The vending was amazing. The food was good. There was nothing that I was like, oh yeah. Obviously I know background, hubbub about how things get done and all this. And that's how every big event happens. I'm always encouraged by every year it getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's how I felt about it. And I'll be a part of it as long as I'm here. You know what I mean? I like the feeling that came along with this year's Juneteenth.
Yeah, it was good. I was glad I could go. So now last question. What's next for Ayisha Elliott, and what do I have to do to get you to run for public office?
Yeah, never gonna do that.
Never?
Gonna
No.
No.
City council.
I thought about it when I was younger.
City council. We need you on city council.
No, oh my God. City council is not big enough for me. Let me just put it that way. Okay?
That's fair.
The mind is too small. Yeah.
Well, you can run for governor then. That's fine.
Right. You know what I really like, my goals in the next 5 years is to get to a national platform. And so I would love to actually be able to advisement to folks who are governors and real advisement to folks who are influencers that are bigger than the billionaire influencers. I would love to be able to sit and talk to people about the decisions of where and who they can how they can support communities who are making billions of dollars. Like I'd love to be able to be someone's advisor that is like not someone, but I'd love to have a talk show. I just need to talk to more people. Does that make sense? Like,
absolutely.
To talk to more people.
Me too.
I'd like to get into the global banking. Like I'd like to talk to people who like are really not actually driven by people. I'd like to talk to people who are driven by people who are not. They're not driven by people. I want to talk to them. I want them to see if there's any human there, right?
Yeah.
So that I can actually talk. In the next 5 years, I mean, that's the biggest goal, but in my next 5 years, like I really would like to get more into a national platform. That's the next
and locally though, and we joke about it, but with city council, you are a very valuable asset for them to have access to, like if they can reach out to you, and I'm sure they do. I'm sure that they have, and
yeah, they have.
And that's really important, and I think I live in Springfield, and Springfield is doing as much as they can to, in my opinion, and maybe people will disagree with this, but I think that they're showing progress in bringing more voices to the table, appointing people.
Yeah. And in my goal, like I said, my intention and impact, when you're bringing people to the table, what's the table made of? Sure. I got to talk to you about that.
No,
I'm the person you want to talk to before you're bringing people to the table, because, like, you can bring people to dinner, but is the food poisonous? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's talk about what's in the food. Are they allergic to this? Like, you don't want to serve them this bullshit. Right. So this is the kind of thing that I'm trying to, that's what I'm trying to get to, is I want to be the person that is helping build the table that makes more sense. Like, don't feed them that food. That food is racist, right? And so, like I said, the intention to impact, I'm trying to get to be before the harm is done. Like, I'm trying to do the pre-talk, the pre-pep.
It's tough because I'm optimistic about some of the directions it's going, but I hear you, because of the fact that it's, it's tough when everyone's like, okay, let's just like take it out of civil rights or whatnot and talk about like the Fed. People are like, let's audit the Fed. I'm like, cool. When we do that, I'm going on vacation.
Right.
you know what I mean? Because it's like tearing it down kind of thing.
Bigger work than we want to make it. We want diversity. We want all the brown and black. We want all the redheads on this side and the blondes on this side, and we want the brunettes on this side. If we're talking about diversity, we just want to mix them all together, right? Right. That doesn't work. Yeah. That doesn't work if the space that you mix them in, is all blonde. Like, it doesn't work. It's not the same. You can't do it that way. And we're going to continue to run in circles if we don't stop trying to hurry to the solution. We need to get the solution right, and we need to make real change. And real change means that you don't get to go so fast. It means that we have to talk about why you're racist and why you don't want to talk about, why you don't want to actually talk about the fact that not only do you not know or give a damn to know Black people, but when you see Black people that you kind of do cringe. That's okay. That's okay. But I want you to recognize that when you're trying to make your policy. You're like, well, I don't cringe when I see Black people. Okay, great. Tell me how you feel about Black people. Well, I don't really think about Black people. That's a problem.
Well, but that's why I think it's so important. Like, I talked about it at length on the podcast, that, a name like Johannes Tadeo in Springfield that was running for city council, and why I thought it was so important for him to be on city council. And the woman that won is great, don't get me wrong. But because there's such a huge Hispanic population, that there's things that just they don't even consider. And so that representation is so important. And so I hear you, and I think you're totally right. It's just, there's these small progressive successes.
We're far away. We're far.
Yeah. And there's progressive successes sometimes that it's like, we're fixing, this is the issue. We're fixing it in the system in place, but at a certain point, we're going to have to tear it all down. Like, we all know that. Yeah. We know that, and so, but for the time being, I think that those things need to happen. Like having a Damian Pitts on the board where he's great. The conversations I had, with him. And I'm just happy about the way Springfield's going in a lot of ways, at least for the short term, so long term, it's going to be interesting. You have a big day. I appreciate you sitting down and chatting with me today. And it's really an honor to get to know you, and I'm a big fan of your show. So anybody listening, Ayisha Elliott, Black Girl from Eugene is the podcast. You can go to blackgirlfromeugene.org, and there's a lot of valuable information. We talked about it. We talked about Kids for the Culture is a really big one. Race equity talks, if your business wants to look into something like that, or your individual.
Yes, that's a big one.
Nurturing Black for parents. White parents with Black kids. I think it's really cool. It's good to know that these resources are there locally. So for your website, blackgirlfromeugene.org, anyone can check that out. There's a ton of stuff for you to look at. Ayisha Elliott, you're awesome. I'm going to end this with a song. I'm picking this song again at the end of last season. This is the beginning of my 4th season of my show. And I'm continuing with this band that I have been listening to on repeat. My friend Brandon Ferguson is the bassist. The band is called Thinking About You Underwater, and the song is called Delusion.
Fragile lives for the hell of it. I'm ahead of it. Sail away from me. And don't believe you're the hypocrite. That'll make you quit. I can guarantee. Not everyone will benefit from the dead of me. Now your head is gone. Sometimes I feel unedited from the dead of it. Save your head from me. But I don't wanna die. Just to realize that I've been alive. this whole damn time. Like ghosts, we went to desolate cities to find broken souls, to steal dead bodies. I know my karma is in a capsule for you to take from. Don't make me the asshole. And I hope that I won't sleep, 'cause I'm a sinking ship. Brittle bones made of jealousy, broken empathy, I thought it was clear. I made an effort to sound sincere, and now I'll disappear. No dependency. Not everyone will benefit from the dead of me. Now you're very wrong. Sometimes I feel I'm cherry red. Throw me in the sea, don't you wait a bit. But I don't wanna die, just to realize that I've been alive this whole damn time. Like ghosts, we went to desolate cities to find broken souls, to steal dead bodies. I know my karma is in a capsule for you to take from. Don't make me the asshole. And I hope that I won't sleep, 'cause I'm a sinking ship. Like ghosts, we went to desolate cities to find broken souls, to steal dead bodies. I know my karma is in a capsule for you to take from. Don't make me the asshole.